So my topic is, I guess the way to put a headline to it would be something around the idea of truth, trust, and where we are in the way of creating a point of view around our marketing. I've started to call it vision-led marketing or something like that. And we're seeing it as a pronounced trend in B2B for sure. And somewhat to a lesser extent, I would say, in B2C. But the idea is this, which is, okay, we've all known the sort of misinformation, lack of trust, the disappearance of truth across social media. And now we're seeing it across artificial intelligence, right? Where artificial intelligence is, generative AI is now creating content, sometimes just making stuff up, and otherwise not getting the facts straight, or just making up stuff because it's dutifully trying to comply with some prompt and get it there. And what we're seeing is sort of that combination of sort of the search for truth and creating trust with our potential consumers, our audiences, I might call them, and this idea of, so content marketing is this well-aged wine, and basically what we see here is everybody got that memo. And the memo is, how to do this, how to do that, how can you actually teach your customers to do something. And what we see, and Gartner's been doing some remarkable research on this as well, which is what buyers are looking for is a point of view that they can trust, a place that they can live from value and content, not necessarily only visit when they have a purchase need. So we can see this happening in best practices with a lot of the companies and clients that we work with, where instead of focusing only on that purchase decision or that thought leadership at that purchase moment, they're building these content ecosystems that actually talk about the world or meet the audience where they need to be in that particular moment, even outside their product or brand or service or those kinds of things. And so it's a fascinating trend that we're seeing, and especially if you put the context to it of AI, social media, misinformation, and all those kinds of things, that the real opportunity there is to how do we start to differentiate in a world where that trust is going to be harder and harder and harder to get.
Robert, thank you. You're an example of that message in action, because as usual, you're giving us a perspective and a way to think about things. You and I talked about this last time we hung out. We had a dinner and a cocktail, and we're going to do that again. But at that time, I told you, yes, I know that my content really doesn't reach a senior audience. It's mostly practical how-to stuff. It's very tactical things, best practices, step by step, and that content programs that offer people a way to think about things are more likely to reach and connect with and be memorable for a more senior audience. I think you were just being generous by saying, yeah, Andy, but it's great. You reach the practitioner. Is what you're saying especially true or for brands that are trying to connect with sort of the C-suite, or is this for everybody?
I think it's for everybody. The wider point, or the broader sort of idea here, is this idea of creating these content ecosystems, if you will, where your customer is not only coming there as a resource. We're good at building resource centers, right? And this is B2C or B2B, right? We build these resource centers, and there's a video on how to do this, or there's a learning podcast for how to do that, or there's a webinar on how to do this, and it's all around typically our product or service, or how to use our product or service better, or why it's so amazing that you should try this product or service. And instead, what we're starting to see now are companies develop entire ecosystems of content where it's not only about the industry, or it's not only about our point of view of the world, but it might literally be, hey, we're going to do a class on, our point of view of sustainability for the planet, or we're going to do a class about, a wonderful example of this. We call these typically conscious experiences. SAP did a brilliant job at this, right? During COVID, they changed the entire editorial strategy of one of their e-commerce blog, because guess what? Nobody wanted to talk about e-commerce during COVID.
Right.
And so they changed the entire editorial strategy to be around what you need to do to reopen your business during a pandemic and how to best practices. And they partnered with Johns Hopkins University and got wonderful points of view around the medical and the healthcare and the business aspects of doing all of that kind of work that had nothing to do with e-commerce. And what they lost in SEO, what they lost in sort of organic traffic, because they were quite honestly not talking about the things that they'd been talking about for so long, was they more than gained up with audience loyalty. In other words, people who came back. So they doubled their traffic. They doubled their engagement.
Wow.
And by the way, kept the lead generation engine going. But it was entirely because they changed the editorial to be a point of view about the world. Like, this is what we think about the world.
Yep.
And changing to meet the audience where they are, rather than sort of saying, hey, if you're ever in this place, you should come visit this, you should come visit this blog. So it's that not getting wrapped around the axle of our brand or our product or our service with regard to content, but rather building that broader value for an audience and truly living up to the idea of being a media company.
That's thought leadership. This was it's a perspective. And so I had a very brief conversation in a Q&A with Seth Godin once, who said several things that I thought of a minute ago while you were speaking. One is that part of the job of content is to start a conversation. People are more likely to have a conversation about the state of the world than a conversation about step-by-step best practices for e-commerce. But also, he said that thought leadership is, it's about taking a stand, and that it causes tension, and you can be certain that someone will disagree, almost as if that's the criteria for the definition. Does it create tension? Can someone disagree with it? You can't really disagree with the 8-step process for setting up GA4. That's just how to do it.
That's exactly right.
But you can disagree with, whether, AI is dangerous, or, what is the pandemic's impact on commercial real estate. There's a million topics that are interesting to people that go beyond, that offer perspective and point of view, not just best practices and practical your resource center.
Sure. Or is GA4 going to actually upend the world of analytics, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is your brand's point of view on that particular topic? I 100% agree, and it gets to this idea of saying, I like what Seth said. The way we typically say it is in order to be right for someone, you have to be willing to be wrong for someone else, and that's a critical component. But in addition, it's also this idea of taking a wider stance on your, we call it a point of view architecture, right? Where you build a point of view that is consistent with your company's point of view about the world. What do we believe about the world? And regardless of where we play, our product or service plays in that world, we were working with another company, a professional services company that, of course they do cloud computing and they do servers and they do installations of SAP, they do big IT consulting things. And one of the things that really got them attention and a lot of awareness and a lot more engagement with their brand was coming out with what they thought the benefit of cloud computing and infrastructures were, and wrote about that. Didn't matter if, the benefit was believing in the thing, not necessarily that we could deliver you the thing. And so it's really taking that, where can we tell a story that tension-filled, provocative, whatever it happens to be, but how do you take that thing and make it beneficial for everyone? Look, the quintessential example of this is HubSpot, right? HubSpot did this in spades when they launched inbound marketing, right? Inbound marketing wasn't a thing. It just wasn't a thing in 2007. And they made it a thing, and they made it beneficial. Whether you used HubSpot or not, the practice of inbound marketing became a thing. And then you went, oh, well, who's the one who has this amazing, it's this company that has this amazing point of view about this new process, which, let's be honest, is marketing automation at its core. But it's really, they made it a thing, and they made a point of view about the world and what they believed about it. And it just so happened that they were the ones who brought it to you.
I think one of the things that we're a HubSpot Platinum partner, and so I have so many HubSpot stories. It's unbelievable. If you ever get a chance, did you guys ever read the book Disrupted or Disrupt?
I did not.
Yes, I did. I did.
Yeah, the guy who wrote Disrupt also wrote for Silicon Valley, the TV show, and
Yeah.
some of his stories are just they're hilarious. I also think it's very easy for one guy in a company to pick apart, this massive ship and just but that's a story for another time. I wanted to
That's a
circle back.
perspective.
On,
That book
Yeah.
is a point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of another
Yep.
example. I've had
Yep.
when I've talked to people sometimes, I try to help them, nudge them toward this idea of thought leadership by challenging them to answer some questions. What do you believe about the future that most people don't agree with? What questions in your industry are people afraid to answer?
Yeah.
These are things, or what Ryan Law from Animals used to say is that, do you have any counter narrative opinions? What a powerful concept, right? Just think about
Yeah.
that for a second. Which I have some that are so provocative that we'd get in a fight if I even said them. Ask me later. But those counter narrative opinions, like it's triggering. It's powerful. There's you can't hear them without thinking immediately of your own perspective.
Yeah, you used to say this thing, Andy. It was like, what are the things that seem like widely accepted things in your industry, but there's no data to support it? Like
Right.
bounce rates have to be this. Well, who made that rule up? You know what I mean? It's just like,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's funny, but if you're gonna draw a line in the sand, and like I think you even had a blog about like I went and looked at every client I had and looked at their bounce rates, and this is what the data supported argument behind this common theme of we say it all the time to the tip of our tongue, and it's like we just heard it from somebody else,
Find a missing stat, produce
Yep.
research that
Exactly.
that supports the frequently. There are frequently asserted but rarely supported things in every category. If you find one of those
Yeah.
and make it, that can be very powerful.
It's so funny that you mentioned that because it's the one thing that we tell clients all the time around thought leadership is don't look for the frequently asked questions, look for the rarely given answers.
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's a difference between search and social. If search is about meeting expectations, social is about being unexpected. They're sort of opposite channels.
Sure.
Thought leadership can work great in social media because it's sort of like, interesting.
Right, because the content finds you, right?
Right,
The
yeah.
content finds you, and it's. And I was just it's the idea that going back to your Seth Godin comment, thought leadership is inherently, by definition, even in the name, it's leading thought, right? So inherently, if you're leading thought, you're talking about things that people aren't searching for.
Exactly. It's that people don't search for counter narrative opinions.
Right.
What is the query? There's no keyword opportunity. It's not a thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's I really appreciate that, and I appreciate that perspective, and I think that we can never stop making this point about the key to having differentiated content. Chris and I are both deep immersed in AI, so we're thinking about this a lot as well, just from that perspective. But Robert, again, your wisdom deeply appreciated.
Absolutely, 100%.
Very cool.